Imagine being crowned queen, having the absolute world at your fingertips, possessing unimaginable wealth and influence, and still being explicitly told by your sister-in-law that you are legally barred from entering a specific room in your very own family estate. That is exactly the jaw-dropping, incredibly surreal scenario, allegedly unfolding behind closed palace doors right at this very moment. According to multiple reports and palace insiders, Princess Anne, the famously no-nonsense, incredibly hardworking Princess Royal, has allegedly taken totally unprecedented legal steps to permanently wall off a private wing of the sprawling Sandringham estate, effectively slamming the heavy oak door directly in Queen Camilla's face, just as she was eagerly planning a secluded, peaceful summer retreat. But why on earth is the most stoic, notoriously resilient woman in the entire British royal family suddenly drawing a literal, lawyer-backed line in the sand at this precise moment? You might initially think this is simply just a petty billionaire squabble over luxury vacation homes, but highly placed sources confidently claim this compelling story runs so much deeper, and the real reason directly involves a massive, constantly brewing scandal tied to a highly disgraced royal sibling that absolutely no one saw coming. To fully grasp the sheer, breathtaking magnitude of this alleged royal standoff, you first have to completely understand the absolute historical sacredness of Sandringham itself, because I promise you, this isn't just some fancy, upscale weekend cabin in the woods, folks. It is the absolute beating heart and the private soul of the Windsor dynasty. Spread across a staggering, almost incomprehensible 20,000 acres of sweeping, beautiful Norfolk parkland, located roughly 110 miles directly north of London, Sandringham was originally snapped up all the way back in 1862 by Queen Victoria as a ridiculously lavish, personal gift for her beloved heir. Unlike the massive, iconic structures like Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle, which legally belong to the state and the nation, Sandringham is the monarch's strictly personal, closely guarded property, officially passing directly from sovereign to sovereign, meaning when Queen Elizabeth tragically passed away in 2022, the entire estate went straight into King Charles's private, personal portfolio. It is the profoundly cherished ground where the famous family historically parades to church every single Christmas morning, where Prince Philip quietly chose to peacefully retire away from the glaring cameras, and where the immensely respected late Queen spent her final, incredibly peaceful days, making the land itself profoundly sentimental and heavily emotionally charged. For multiple generations, the royals have expertly managed the sprawling, diverse cluster of historic homes effortlessly scattered across these massive grounds. Breathtaking places like Anmer Hall, Park House, and the notoriously secluded Wood Farm, through quiet, strictly unwritten gentlemen's agreements, essentially just blindly trusting each other to amicably share the vast space without ever causing a messy public fuss. But hold on to your seats, because here is the massive, undeniable twist that absolutely changes the entire dynamic. In the incredibly turbulent, intensely scrutinized social climate of 2026, those polite, extremely British, unwritten gentlemen's agreements have apparently completely crashed and burned into absolute ashes. When you start actively seeing top-tier, senior royals quietly arming themselves with high-powered legal representation just to officially secure access to a family summer home, it is a glaring, massive red flag signaling that the inherent family trust is entirely gone, instantly leaving all of us to intensely wonder what exactly triggered this sudden, deeply aggressive legal posturing. Well, to truly understand the initial spark of this fiery conflict, you essentially have to look back at the incredibly deep, fiercely complicated, 50-year-old fault line constantly simmering dangerously between Princess Anne and Queen Camilla. This heavily rumored, intensely scrutinized Cold War did not just spontaneously ignite out of thin air when Charles and Camilla finally officially tied the knot in 2005. According to veteran royal insiders, The profound, undeniable friction actually dates all the way back to the hazy days of the 1970s. That was the exact controversial era when Camilla first dramatically caught Charles's wandering eye, ultimately setting off an unstoppable, tragic chain reaction that famously shattered his highly publicized marriage to the beloved Princess Diana, and fiercely fractured the very traditional institution that Anne has fiercely dedicated her entire, unwavering life to fiercely protecting. Princess Anne is practically universally regarded by the British public as the absolute iron backbone of the modern monarchy, an incredibly resilient woman who relentlessly undertakes significantly more royal engagements than almost anyone else in the family, constantly approaching her daily duties with a fiercely disciplined, almost intimidating military precision while actively and purposefully shunning the dramatic media spotlight. Camilla, on the completely opposite hand, originally entered the highly exclusive royal fold carrying the crushing, undeniable weight of a massive, unprecedented public controversy. And while she has undeniably worked incredibly hard to actively rehabilitate her public image and successfully win over the skeptical British public, internal sources loudly claim the deep underlying tension between her and Anne never truly evaporated. In fact, verified insiders have quite recently described their tense daily dynamic to major news outlets as a perpetual, exhausting Cold War that occasionally, dramatically flares into open, excessively polite hostility, with Anne reportedly strongly feeling that Camilla constantly oversteps her intended boundaries, while Camilla allegedly views Anne as far too stubbornly rigid to successfully separate blind family loyalty from sensible, modern public relations. But wait, because this intense mutual suspicion has now shockingly escalated from shooting icy, silent stares at lavish state banquets into a tangible, high-stakes, extremely real turf war over physical, historical territory at Sandringham. And the ultimate shocking catalyst for this explosive, unprecedented legal maneuver isn't even truly Camilla herself. Get absolutely ready, because here is the unbelievable detail that truly blows this entire situation wide open and keeps you guessing. The entire messy conflict was allegedly directly ignited by the spectacular, historically devastating disgrace of Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. Yes, to truly unravel this confusing, complex legal maze, you absolutely have to trace the chaotic, destructive domino effect directly started by King Charles's heavily scrutinized younger brother. Back in late 2025, King Charles formally and very publicly stripped Andrew of his few remaining royal titles, his military honors, and his absolute right to ever reside in any prestigious crown estate properties. A massive, undeniably humiliating demotion following his infamous, globally catastrophic television interview regarding his deeply controversial, highly inappropriate past associations. As a direct, unavoidable result of that relentless, punishing public fallout, Andrew was unceremoniously ousted from the staggeringly lavish, 30-room royal lodge near Windsor and quietly, desperately relocated to Wood Farm, a much more modest, historically quiet residence tucked far away on the massive Sandringham estate, seemingly kept completely out of the public's sight. But then, incredibly shockingly, came the brisk morning of February 19th, 2026, which also happened to be Andrew's 66th birthday, when highly secretive unmarked police cars allegedly rapidly descended on the sprawling Sandringham estate, urgently conducting simultaneous, totally unexpected searches, while Andrew was reportedly taken directly into custody on severe suspicion of misconduct in public office. Intensely held for roughly 11 hours before finally being released under active, ongoing investigation. This absolutely astonishing, deeply unprecedented turn of events officially marked the very first time a direct sibling of a currently reigning monarch faced such severe, intensely direct legal scrutiny since Queen Elizabeth I famously had her sister Mary decisively detained way back in the year 1554. while King Charles strictly and publicly maintained a very strict, unemotional, stoic stance that the absolute law must simply take its natural course. Princess Anne reportedly burst aggressively into the picture directly behind the scenes, fiercely and relentlessly advocating for her highly troubled brother's absolute basic human dignity. According to multiple, highly verified reports, Anne has been quietly but intensely lobbying both King Charles and Prince William, expressing profound, genuine concerns about Andrew's rapidly declining, fragile mental well-being and actively driving a highly private, determined family effort to desperately ensure the cold institution doesn't just toss him completely and utterly to the proverbial wolves. But here is precisely where the irresistible, completely undeniable friction officially hits an absolute, dramatic boiling point that you just can't look away from. Queen Camilla has allegedly taken an absolute, undeniably ironclad, uncompromising hardline against showing Andrew any public or private leniency whatsoever, reportedly heavily viewing any public display of family solidarity as a massive, entirely unforgivable threat to the monarchy's already deeply fragile, heavily scrutinized global reputation. One highly vocal palace source even boldly claimed that Camilla is genuinely, deeply appalled that Anne is relentlessly pursuing the controversial matter at all, which essentially means this fierce, unbending ideological clash over exactly how to handle a universally disgraced brother has now physically manifested into a literal, extremely aggressive battle for space, unfettered access, and absolute legal dominance directly at Sandringham. So, what exactly did Princess Anne's highly paid, incredibly elite legal team confidently do to brilliantly flip the entire royal chessboard? According to highly placed, incredibly reliable sources, Anne formally asserted, aggressively drafted, and officially documented her family's long-standing private use rights over a very specific, deeply cherished wing of the sprawling Sandringham estate through her legal representatives, officially transforming a casual, totally friendly family custom into a binding, completely documented, undeniably real legal reality. Now, to be completely fair, thoroughly balanced, and totally honest here, Anne is not allegedly trying to maliciously steal outright ownership of the sitting king's precious property. Rather, she is brilliantly establishing formal licenses to physically occupy and implementing customary use agreements, which is actually a remarkably common practice among highly wealthy, deeply aristocratic British families, the moment when informal, polite trust starts to magically evaporate. By purposefully engaging sharp solicitors to formally, undeniably document her exact turf in the year 2026, Anne is brilliantly and systematically accomplishing two undeniably major things completely simultaneously. First, she is cleverly generating an absolutely ironclad, undeniable legal paper trail that the slick palace bureaucrats simply cannot easily override, casually ignore, or quietly sweep under the extremely luxurious, incredibly expensive palace rugs. Second, and perhaps infinitely far more intensely, she is intentionally sending a blindingly clear, utterly undeniable message directly to Camilla and the broader, heavily watching palace hierarchy, clearly stating to the entire world, "This is absolutely my family's historic territory, and I will absolutely, positively not be quietly or politely displaced by anyone." The incredibly sharp timing of this alleged, highly strategic legal strike is genuinely masterful, largely because Sandringham House officially and totally closes to the general public precisely between July 13th and August 3rd, which is precisely the exact window when the entire royal family traditionally and historically retreats to the lush estate for their deeply private, highly exclusive summer gatherings. Loud whispers had been rapidly circulating that Queen Camilla was actively, highly eagerly eyeing one of the massive estate's highly private wings for an extended, deeply secluded personal retreat during this exact, specific period, especially since King Charles typically strictly prefers to quickly travel up to Balmoral in chilly Scotland to joyfully enjoy the dreary, absolutely freezing summer rain. By confidently dropping these severe legal papers right at this exact moment, Anne has effectively and brilliantly vaporized Camilla's peaceful summer plans for that highly specific area, legally locking the historic door, and allegedly leaving the sitting queen absolutely, unconditionally furious. Naturally, the intensely guarded palace PR machine has remained completely and utterly silent on the incredibly tense matter. You really, truly have to appreciate the deliciously dramatic irony of the entire absurd situation. Now, let me just casually add my own highly personal, incredibly honest human opinion into this absolute, swirling whirlwind of bizarre regal drama, because frankly, it is incredibly, endlessly fascinating from a purely psychological perspective. I honestly think that as much as we actively look at these glittering royal figures as completely untouchable, stoic historical icons peacefully living in massive, heavily guarded gilded cages, they are ultimately just a wildly dysfunctional, totally relatable family desperately dealing with the exact same deeply petty, completely frustrating squabbles the rest of us actively face, just with significantly more historic acreage and infinitely better, highly terrifying real estate lawyers. It is honestly somewhat downright hilarious, heavily sarcastic, and deeply comforting to casually think that even powerful billionaires with literal, shiny crowns, securely fastened on their wealthy heads still, somehow end up viciously squabbling over who exactly gets to peacefully use the massive summer house in July, definitively proving that absolutely no amount of unimaginable, staggering wealth or massive historic prestige can magically, effortlessly cure basic, undeniable in-law tension. I firmly and passionately believe Anne's fiercely protective, unwavering loyalty to her highly troubled, utterly disgraced brother, regardless of the incredibly severe, entirely unpalatable allegations heavily stacked against him, genuinely shows a profoundly human, deeply raw, and unexpectedly vulnerable side to her notoriously stoic, icy character, strongly proving she actually genuinely values deep blood ties over basic public optics, even if it casually causes a massive, absolutely catastrophic public relations nightmare for the entire ruling crown. So, the ultimate, highly critical question absolutely remains heavily hanging in the thick, tense air, heavily loaded with massive, undeniable implications for the entire future of the fragile crown. I really, desperately want to know exactly what you guys genuinely think about this absolutely wild, entirely unprecedented situation. So do you firmly believe Princess Anne is completely, undeniably justified in successfully taking extreme, highly aggressive legal action to fiercely protect her family's historic territory and her deeply controversial brother? Or has she recklessly, intentionally crossed a highly dangerous, completely irreversible line that will permanently, violently shatter the fragile monarchy completely from the inside out? Please let me quickly know your honest, unfiltered thoughts directly down below in the comments. Please make absolutely sure to aggressively hit that huge like button right now if you found this deep dive totally fascinating. Definitely subscribe to the channel for more incredibly juicy, highly detailed royal updates just like this one. And I will happily see you all in the very next thrilling video.